For the World of Warcraft raids, gameplay, questing, and more panel. Your panelists are Craig Amai, Tom Chilton, Ian Hazakostas, Dave Kosak, Corey Stockton, and Greg Street.
All right. Hello, guys. Just jumping right into things. So this panel, we're going to kind of pick up a bit where we left off at our intro panel yesterday. Go over some raids info, questing info, gameplay, and other systems that we didn't get to talk about yesterday, and then we'll have some time for question and answer right after that. So let me just jump right into this. I want to talk a little bit more about the raid content that we're going to have in Warlords of Draenor. So yesterday I mentioned the Blackrock Foundry raid. This is going to be the capstone of the raid content that we launched the expansion with. As I mentioned, we're going to try to repeat the two-tier system that we had in Mists of Pandaria, where we have that sort of smaller intro tier that's available right away to kind of whet your appetite for raiding, as most of the world is still leveling and gearing up and getting ready for that. And then a few weeks after that, we unlock, sort of the real centerpiece of the intro expansion content, and that's going to be the Blackrock Foundry. Now, this is the center of the Iron Horde war machinery in the zone of Gorgrond. It's going to be a 10-boss raid and non-linear layout. We have heard you guys, we miss Ulduar 2, we miss Icecrown Citadel, that type of layout. There's a lot to be said for delivering both an epic raid.
So does one other guy.
Exactly. Just that one guy, though. There's a lot to be said for delivering an epic raid in terms of scope, but also giving you the freedom to kind of work your way through a place more organically, instead of just proceeding from boss 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's also nice to be able to choose what you're going to progress on, and so forth. So we're happy to do that. And your goal here is going to be to dismantle the Blackrock Foundry from the inside, tear down the war-making capabilities of the Iron Horde, and face off against Warlord Blackhand, who is the chieftain of the Blackrock Orcs, and heads up the Foundry as a whole. Now, this is a concept illustrating just kind of the general vibe we're going for here. Really just a lot of, this is smoke and soot and flame and dark iron. That's what the Iron Horde's all about. That's what their machinery is all about. Now, this is a sort of overall layout in 2D of what we're looking at for the structure of the raid as a whole. And you see there are 3 wings here. There is sort of the first wing, which is mostly about melting down the ore into slag. Second wing, where that molten ore is forged and refined and shaped into weapons, armor, the engines of war. And then finally an assembly wing, where all of that is put together, soldiers are armored up, the war machines are shipped off to the front lines. Now, we want to put this together really as something that has a very functional feel to it. This isn't, a place that was designed as a raid zone, this is a place that was designed as a foundry. And we want to get back to some of that interconnectedness that you got as you walk through old places like Upper Blackrock Spire or Blackrock Depths, where you can kind of look down and see the other parts of the zone going on around you. So just because you see this 2D layout where everything is spread out in different directions, that's really more just to kind of help us in our conceptualization of the zone. But the thought is 3 separate wings, and then once you've cleared all of these wings, you can access the crucible that you see at the top of this layout, where Blackhand himself awaits. Now, part of what we'd like to do in having non-linear layouts is also really preserve some of the freedom that players currently doing flexible mode may be used to in how they approach the zone. Right? If you're doing Siege of Orgrimmar today, at this point, if you want to just queue up and face off against Garrosh directly, you can do that if you're doing flexible. Now, with our new raid structure, it's going to be something that you just zone in the front door for instead of queuing, but we want to preserve some of that freedom. So we envision some things such as maybe once you've cleared all the wings a certain number of times, maybe you can forge a key that lets you directly access the Crucible later on, if your raid leader has that ability, so that you don't necessarily have to feel like if you have to re-clear 9 bosses just to get to the 10th every time. And in general, you have as much freedom and you'd be able to plan your raid week the way you want. Speaking of the new raid structure, I'd like to revisit this slide from yesterday's panel. I know there were a lot of questions, and I've definitely heard a lot of interesting discussion coming out of this. I just wanted to clarify how this is going to work overall. So in Warlords, we're going to have ultimately 3 different difficulty tiers for organized raid content. Raid Finder, more or less unchanged. The Raid Finder of Warlords is going to be the Raid Finder you know today, with some addition of flexible scaling tech to help a bit with queue times, to help with minimizing waiting time if people leave midway. But other than that, we see the normal mode in Warlords really being equivalent to what flexible mode is today in difficulty and in overall, in our overall philosophy towards it. It just doesn't make sense to call a difficulty flexible once flexible really is the norm and how the majority of our raiding is going to work in Warlords. If you are a normal mode guild today, you will find heroic content likely suitable for you in Warlords, except that will now scale from 10 to 25 flexibly. And if you're a heroic guild today, our 20-player mythic content will be for you. Now, about the raid structure, one of the awesome things about this, and one of the things that makes flexible raiding as a style great, is the freedom that it gives you to raid with friends that maybe can't necessarily make all of your raids, people that may log on late for the raid one night, they can hop in, and you can also participate without necessarily feeling a sense of obligation where you're letting 3 people down if something comes up and you can't make it. But what this also means is that all of our raiding, except for Mythic, will be fully cross-server enabled from day 1. That is normal, that is heroic. So when Highmall or when the BlackRock Foundry opens up, if you have, you want to join some real-life friends on another server for their normal mode raid on the weekend after you do heroic with your guild, you can do that, or vice versa. We really want to give the maximum amount of flexibility to be able to play with your friends and experience the content as you choose. I think cross-server Mythic would be a bit messy with things like Realm Firsts, and for the most part, Mythic guilds are grounded to a single server, so we're keeping it that way. Each difficulty has a separate lockout. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I did heroic with my guild on Wednesday, so I can't join my friend's raid on the weekend. It also means there's no more dynamic difficulty switching, because everything is its own lockout, which has some other interesting implications. Right now, you have the UI interaction very frequently, if you're a normal or heroic raider, where you say, let's switch the difficulty to heroic for this boss, then back to normal. Well, when you're doing Mythic raiding, for example, you're just doing it as a standalone raid. It means we can also have Mythic Trash. I know everyone really has wanted Mythic Trash if you've been dying for it for years. Okay, maybe not. But you can get Mythic Trash loot, which is something.
Gastropods.
Just wait for the Mythic Gastropod. Moves like 10 times faster. Now, the way these lockouts are going to work also is that they're very similar to the current flexible lockouts in that they're loot-based lockouts. That is to say that you can be in the raid with a boss alive that you've already looted that week. However, you just can't loot it again. So again, if you want to help out a friend, if someone asks you to join them later on, you're not going to be able to loot the same boss twice, because that would be all kinds of problematic, but you're completely free to raid and join groups as you see fit. Currently, the way flexible raids work, you go through the interface and you queue up for it, you're teleported into the zone. That's a concession, ultimately, that we made to just get the raid finder functionality, to get flexible raid functionality into the game and in your hands for Siege of Orgrimmar, which we think is very well worth it and awesome. But in the long run, this is normal raiding going forward. This isn't some special mode. This is just how raiding works. You walk in the front door, you form a group, you zone into the instance, and you are raiding, except it scales flexibly. The only raid activity that's going to work through queuing through the UI and teleporting is going to be Raid Finder. So, how does loot work, many people have asked? Does this mean that personal loot is now the norm for heroic raiding? No. Again, personal loot as it currently stands is really well suited to groups of strangers in Raid Finder, or pickup groups where maybe it lets you not have to deal with, do you trust someone to be the master looter? Do I trust this guy's not going to ninja loot and run off with things? But when you're playing with your guildmates, when you're playing with your friends, you want the ability to trade items to those who need them more than you. If someone comes back to the game after a while, maybe you want to kind of train them through and dump a bunch of loot in their laps so that they can really get caught up quickly. Maybe you want to pass something to someone for their 4-piece set bonus. All those things need to be possible, we feel, and that's how loot is going to work in normal and heroic mode. So that raises the question, of course, well, how is the drop going to work? If I have 13 people, do I get 2.6 loots? What is 0.6 of a loot? The answer is actually 0.6 of a loot is 60% chance to get a third loot. So the thought is that this will scale smoothly, where the ratio of loot drops per eligible player remains constant throughout. We really want to avoid and continue to work on avoiding any perception of breakpoints or magic numbers when it comes to making these flexible groups. That's something we've certainly learned and heard from the community as this has played out. We never want you to feel like when your friend asks to join, you say, oh no, that's going to put us over some invisible threshold. We also don't want you to feel like you need to go out and find some random warm body to get over some threshold. In addition to loot, one of the things that we're working on doing is streamlining the way some of our ability targeting and logic work, again, to avoid breakpoints. In many cases today, you have cutoffs where when you bring a 15th player, suddenly 3 people get targeted by some boss's ability instead of 2. Again, we feel like with most abilities, we can probably randomize in a way that avoids the existence of breakpoints. So for example, to use a Siege of Orgrimmar example, Sun Tenderheart in the Fallen Protectors encounter casts Shadowward Bane. Shadowward Bane hits two people if you have 10 players, 5 people if you have 25. Today, the second you go from 14 to 15, it starts hitting a third person, which makes many people, I think, somewhat justifiably feel, well, we should try to avoid having 15. 14 is kind of a magic number. Well, if instead it just hit when you had 14, it had an 80% chance of hitting 3, 20% chance of hitting 2, over the course of the fight as a whole, you're still going to see the same number of debuffs on average, but you're never going to feel like you're hurting yourself by bringing an extra person. Now, there are some mechanics that won't necessarily work for, like prisons on Shav Pride, where it's actually really important to know exactly how many are going to go out. You don't want to be caught by surprise or have to be random every time. But for the most part, we're going to do everything we can do to avoid the existence of breakpoints when it comes to mechanics, when it comes to loot, and to really make it feel like, okay, you have 17 people online, go raid with 17. You have 12 online, go raid with 12. Just play with your friends, have fun, enjoy the content. Now I'm going to hand it off to Craig, who's going to talk a bit about some of the quest revamps we have coming up.
Thank you, Ian. Hello, BlizzCon. All right, let's talk about questing. So one of the first things you're going to notice when you step into Draenor is that we're calling out key storylines through icons on our quest tracker and our quest log. Essentially, we want to draw attention to the big quest chains with big characters that lead towards big rewards, so you can make intelligent decisions about what content you want to participate in, what you want to focus on, especially as you reach that kind of end of the zone point where you're considering moving on. While those key storylines are guiding you through zones, you're going to be noticing that a lot of the other quests outside of those chains are more distinctly separated. So you really have the choice of whether you want to participate in additional quests along the way or whether you want to follow just that primary story track. This will have the side effect also of making the world feel a little bit more full and organic. If you go wandering out and find a quest hub, there won't be a magic quest that unlocks it and makes all the quests there start appearing. And it'll give you a lot more control over your experience. The efficient route will still be follow those key storylines, pick up the other quests along the way. But if you've been doing dungeons a fair bit, or again, if you're reaching the end of a zone, you may choose to focus on those key storylines and not be picking up as much of those strictly optional quests. As you go through these zones questing, you'll notice we'll be using a lot more of these side systems, dynamic events and treasures that we first introduced on Timeless Isle. So dynamic events are essentially gameplay challenges with cool rewards behind them and minimap callouts. So on Timeless Isle, for the most part, they were soloable rare spawns, but as you step into Draenor, you're going to be seeing some more complex versions, some multi-stage events with big culminations, or some wandering raid bosses that encourage lots of players to pile up and overcome a big social challenge. These will be mixed in a lot more during the level up experience. You'll also be seeing them a lot at level 100. So it should make the entire experience feel a little bit more, again, organic. Make it feel like there are opportunities coming up outside just the questing experience. Treasures are essentially our way of encouraging you to explore the world even more than the art already does. We make beautiful worlds, and we want to reward you for peeking in every nook and cranny. So the idea with treasures is when you find that hidden path that leads up the mountain that the quest never took you up, it's very likely there will be something at the top of it that makes it worthwhile to go up there. We also want to, with our treasures, kind of support just little mini stories within the world. So a couple examples you'll see in Frostfire. When you go into one of our ogre towers, you might run into a little bird's nest up on a rafter that just has a sparkling gem in it that you can loot for a cool reward. Or you might run into an Iron Horde caravan that's become entrenched in snow with some Iron Horde troops trying to dig out the wheels. And if you kill them, there's a chest on the back of their caravan that has a cool reward in it. Expect these to be very frequent, because as we have that goal of encouraging exploration, we want to make sure that we're doing it effectively all over the world. Another thing you'll be seeing is what you might be used to from the reward scheme for quests is that you'll run into a lot of green items along the way, and then cool blue items at the end of essentially key storyline chains. What you'll be running into now is that there's going to be a lot more opportunity for rewards to spike during your questing experience. So a reward that might be green for one player might actually end up being blue or epic for another player. It'll become less predictable, a little more exciting as you're questing through. We also have a fair number of UI updates that are coming in with Draenor. I want to give you a sneak peek at a few of them. So here you'll notice the special icons next to some of the quests in the quest log. Those are the key storyline icons I was talking about. Above them, you also notice that we're calling out the number of key storylines that exist in a zone in the form of chapters here, 2 out of 6. This will help you actually have a rough gauge of your progress through a zone, so you can make choices about whether you want to finish that zone off versus moving on to another one, depending on how far you're through. The other thing you'll notice here is the quest banks on the map. Those are actually calling out the locations of key storylines that you haven't yet picked up, or that maybe you abandoned along the way. So these will actually dynamically update if you went halfway through a storyline and stopped. They'll show you where you can pick back up on that storyline if you want to. This should make it a lot easier to figure out exactly what you need to do to knock out those zone achievements, finish off a zone without, asking for help from CS or anything. Max level content. I want to talk about this a little bit while we're here too. So we had the philosophy going from Cataclysm into Mists of Pandaria that we wanted to provide you a lot more things to do when you reached max level. Well, that philosophy still stands moving into Draenor. We want to give you lots of options, a lot of opportunity for things outside of just dungeons and raiding, things that you can do in the outdoor world. So in Draenor, you'll be seeing more max level content than ever before, but I can promise you right now that little, if any, of it is going to be daily quests. So there's a couple key content structure philosophies we locked in on Mists of Pandaria that we really liked. One of them was the progressive long-term storylines behind the Dominance Offensive and Operation Shield Wall dailies. The chapter-based, kind of like leave you off on a cliffhanger, pick it up again in a few days or a week type content to take you through a big story over a longer duration. The other content structure we really liked the success of was the more open-ended structure inherent with Timeless Isle, with the exploration, the deep reward systems, options for how you want to participate your content. We essentially want to marry those two structures and create big zones with lots of opportunity, free-form content that have these long-term progressive storylines that thread through them over the weeks, so you keep having reason to go back and dive into them even deeper. The one other type of max level content you might be seeing a bit more of in Draenor is essentially environmental gameplay in the form of, I guess you would have seen it in our Troves of the Thunder King loot room scenario. What we want to push forward is opportunities to use all those class abilities in the outdoor world that sometimes only apply to PvP or top-end raiding. Opportunities to play out your race and your class to its unique advantages to try and squeeze out extra rewards. So you'll be seeing a little bit more of that at max level too. So that's a good overview of our max level content. Next up, we're going to talk about garrisons. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Corey.
I'll just going to jump in and reiterate some of the points. Our overall goal with our questing system is we wanted to create a more dynamic world, a more organic experience this time, and really kind of break you out of your patterns that you have while you're questing so that you see more happening around you. And particularly at max level, we experimented a lot in Pandaria, and some of those experiments we think worked out really great. Some of them were the Golden Lotus, but we tried a lot of things, and I think you'll see some of those more successful experiments roll up into the next expansion, because we really want to have a lot to do out in the world while you're exploring this great world of Draenor.
Right on. So now we're going to get into some garrisons. Anyone that was here yesterday for our talk, we kind of did an overview of the system, and today we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into how some of this stuff works. So when you build your garrison, you get a certain number of buildings that are already there to begin with. These are things that we didn't think would they didn't really fit the paradigm of taking this structure and getting to place it anywhere in the garrison, like a mine, for example. A mine kind of has to be placed in a specific spot. The town hall is your main building. That's the building you're going to go to interact with the guys that are running your garrison and send your guys on missions. So that's got a predefined spot, and it upgrades with your garrison as it goes. After you have starting buildings, you'll get the chance to build your first small building. Here's a list of all the small buildings that you can build. All of our profession buildings are considered in the small category. And this really fits the kit of what we were talking about yesterday, where you'll be able to actually dabble into professions that your main character doesn't have. So for example, let's say you find a follower, and that follower is an engineer. You can now choose to build the engineering works building, assign that follower to that building, and then you can now run missions to get recipes for engineering and build engineering items, but you're actually not even an engineer. You're a blacksmith miner, for example. It's a really cool way to integrate it into the gameplay. So moving on, now we have medium buildings. This is kind of the next step up from smalls. It's a wide variety of buildings here. The inn, we talked a little bit about the inn yesterday. That's a place that you could find new followers. This will also be the place that you can get the pet stable, which is a building that's very unique to pet battles. You'll be able to come here. There'll be a trainer here you can fight. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do here that'll be just based around having that one unique building. Next up would be large buildings. These are the things that you would expect to see like in a Warcraft 3 base. Things like your barracks, right? Your armory, your mage tower. These are really these defining large buildings that are going to set the scale for your garrison. Each of these buildings has a bonus. These buildings have some of the best bonuses because they're the largest ones that you can get. So things like the barracks will increase the amount of followers you can actually have at any one time. So you're going to want to have more because they're out getting that loot for you. So the more followers you can have out on missions, the better chance you have to get new loot. Now, how do the buildings work? As we talked about yesterday, they upgrade over time. So you start out with a building. Now, each building has its own unique upgrade. So that that barracks that you built, it'll start out, looking kind of doinky, kind of small. But over time, you can get cooler and cooler versions that'll make it look more badass, more awesome, and it'll increase the bonus. So here's a look at a screenshot from our mock-up UI of how this would work. You can see the tooltip there on the infirmary that right now it's level 1, but at level 2 it increases the bonus. Obviously you'll have to pay a cost to get that, but you'll do all of that through this UI. You'll be able to come to the building, choose to upgrade it, wait a little bit of time, and then you'll get that new bonus. Now, how do we get the upgrades? Some upgrades you're just going to be able to purchase just for gold or currency. But we really want to get this feature to be something that feels like a part of the world. So we're going to drop a new item called blueprints. And you'll be able to find blueprints all over the world, lots of different ways. They could be a faction reward, quest reward, a random drop in a zone. When you find it, you just right-click it, just like a recipe for a profession, and then you can go back to your garrison, and now you'll know how to build that upgrade for that building. Where are these plans? Anyone that's played the pet battle system will be familiar with this concept here. So on this infirmary, to get the level 3 blueprint, we tell you where it is in the world. We show you it's a drop, it's in Frostfire Ridge. We could do the same thing with faction or wherever it would go. So you don't need to hop out of the game and go somewhere to try to find that info. It's right here available to you. Now, yesterday we talked a little bit about this too, about specializations. This allows you to customize a building once it gets to rank 3. So buildings have a total of 3 upgrades, and when they hit that 3rd upgrade, you unlock the ability to specialize it. So here's a look at what that would look like in game. You can see this armory has 3 specializations. Currently, we're thinking we'll let you change the specialization probably once each day. We might put a cost on it to change the specialization. We don't want you swapping it all the time, but we definitely want to give you the option to change it without too much trouble. It's a really cool reward for getting rank 3 of a building. Not only do you get the new art, the better bonus, but you get this piece of customization that you can do to it. Some buildings will let you assign followers to them. The example I gave you guys about the engineer a little earlier, all the profession buildings can have a follower assigned. But you can also assign followers to other places, like the mine, for example. You could find a miner, assign him there, and then he could actually work offline while you're gone and collect ore for you. And then what you could do is you could come back into the garrison, go to that building, and collect that ore from him when you log back in. Here's a look at what that would look like. Here's a mine. You can see we've got an orc there working away, generating a specific amount of ore per hour. But it's not like this is free, right? Because that follower, he's working at this mine, but he could also be out running a mission for you, trying to get loot. And that's where a lot of the gameplay really comes into running your garrison. You're going to have to make decisions about, I have these followers, do I want to have them do things for me in the garrison, trying to learn profession recipes, gathering resources, or do I want to send them out on a mission and have them try to bring back, gear for me? You have to really make those choices. So the garrison itself upgrades as a whole. You have buildings that upgrade, but you're going to need a place to put all those buildings. So your garrison starts small, but as it grows, we'll give you more plots to put things in. So here's a look at how that UI would work. This garrison is currently at tier 2. It can go up to tier 3, and you'll get 3 more building slots, allowing you to get more bonuses, find more followers that you can assign to those buildings. It's really a system. It works like your character, right? Every time you level, you get an opportunity to do more things and do more stuff, and that's really the concept here. We want the garrison to grow with you. Now, how do you get it to actually change from one tier to the next? You have to fill all the plots. So let's say at rank 2, your garrison has 6 plots. Once you get a building in all 6 of those plots, you'll unlock the ability to upgrade the garrison as a whole and move it to the next tier. Those plots come in 3 sizes, and you just have to match up the building size with the plot size, and then you can place that building anywhere you want in that garrison, as long as the plots match up. So here's a look at the garrison map in-game. This is rank 1. So we've got 5 plots here for players to use. This is what you start with. Then you go into rank 2, and you can see we've added a few more plots here. A mage tower has been placed, an infirmary. And finally, here's rank 3. And everything's unlocked in this garrison. There's still a few empty spots for players to fill here, but you can really get the vibe of how big it grows with you. So you've got followers, you've got buildings. What do you do with them? You need to send them on missions. So let's talk a little bit about how that would work. Missions can be a number of different activities. Here's an example of a few, how it would work in game. You can send them on a quest. You can do a scenario. You can obviously run a dungeon, and even you can run raids. Raids we're thinking are going to take multiple days to run, but it's really that cool, epic feeling that these followers you find can do awesome, cool things. They're not just hanging out. You can send them out to actually fight for you. The difference between all these activities is they take a different number of followers. So a quest you can run with a single follower, whereas a dungeon you would have to combine 5 followers together and send them off. So how do you assign them? Here's a look at that UI. So your followers are listed out here on the left. On the right, you've got a list of missions. In this case, they're dungeon missions. And you just drag followers into those slots. You can see those lists of icons down there on the right side. Those are basically traits for the mission. And what you want to do is try to match those traits up with the abilities on your follower to get a bonus. So let's say there's a mission where you've got to kill orcs. There's an ability on followers called Orc Bane. You want to try to match those 2 together, and then you'll get a bonus on that mission, and you'll do better at it. So next up, you select the mission here. We show you the difficulty of the mission. So as you're dragging the followers into the UI, it's going to dynamically change and try to give you a little bit of help and know this is something you can do probably pretty easily. This mission, you might have a chance to fail at it, so you really want to decide, do I want to send those guys on it or not? And of course, when you're done, you send them off and wait for them to bring back your sweet loot. So that's a little bit of some more details on how garrisons will work. I'm going to hand it off to Greg, and he's going to talk to you about some of the system stuff coming up.
I was going to elaborate a little bit, because one of the things that I think is important to call out is that even though you're using that UI to assign your follower that has mining into the mine is an actual physical place in your garrison. So when you go there and you go inside the mine, you'll actually see your follower hard at work. Maybe you can whip him a little bit or whatever it is you want to do. If he's a lazy peon. But maybe
The booterang
Steve or something like that. So you can go in there and you'll even be able to get some mining nodes yourself, and even that mine upgrades over time. So the mine is able to get bigger, so you're able to get access to more nodes, stuff like that.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about social philosophy. I hinted at this yesterday, but ultimately, we want World of Warcraft to be a game that you play with your friends. We think you guys will have more fun. We think you'll build connections. You'll ultimately probably stick with the game longer. So what we're really going to try to do in Warlords is to encourage you to play with the friends you already have. We're trying to remove the barriers that stop that from happening. And we'd also like to encourage you to make new friends. There was once upon a time, before we offered so much random matchmaking, where you would, hey, this guy's a really good tank. Maybe next time I run a dungeon, I want to find this guy. Nowadays, we can provide a tank, sometimes takes a little longer than others, but we'll probably get you a tank at the end of the day, and there's less motivation to play with your friends. I like this anecdote with the guys in my office. One day I turned around, and one of the dudes was running a dungeon. I'm like, man, if he had asked me, I would have run it with him, but it was so easy just to jump into the dungeon himself that, maybe I wanted to get a cup of coffee or something first, and it was easier just to random matchmake than to play with a guy sitting right next to him. So the random matchmaking isn't going anywhere. We're still going to have Dungeon Finder, we're still going to have Raid Finder, but we kind of want that to feel like a last resort. That's what you do when your friends aren't online, or you're between friends, you start a new job, you got to find a different group. We're going to try to make Raid Finder feel a little more like tourist mode. You're there to see the content and experience the bosses and get to tell part of the story, but we're going to try to encourage people to also experiment with what normal and heroic feel like. So how are we going to support all of this enhanced socialness? We've talked a lot about flexible raiding. Something else we're going to do is finally add a pretty good group finder. We have a raid browser in the game today, and it's pretty terrible, and you guys probably forgot it was there. You can still access it. It's kind of a trick to find it. But we think this feature can be a lot bigger, a lot cooler, compete with the random matchmaking stuff that's already out there. There are some mods and add-ons that people have developed to do this already, and there's a ton of demand from you guys, so we're going to do it. It's going to be very browser-based. You can make a group to do anything. If you want to go back and work on your Shadowmourne, you want to go make a group to kill world bosses, you want to make a rated battleground team, you can do all of that here. It's all cross-realm. You can browse through, find a group of people that look like you want to hang out with, and get a group together. Stacking the deck is a new type of buff that you'll see in Dungeon Finder. Currently, we have the luck of the draw, where we give you rewards to encourage you to play with people in the random queue. Believe it or not, at the time, we were worried that people wouldn't use Dungeon Finder, so you had to give you a little bit of extra incentive there, and that worked out really, really well. So the way stacking the deck will work is it will give you a different type of bonus, in this case, bonus Valor. Imagine you get 10% bonus Valor for every friend that you queue with. And then that last bullet is indicating that if you do use Dungeon Finder for a random group, and you get to the end, you're like, hey, this worked out pretty well, do you guys want to re-queue? That will then count as a pre-made group, and you will also get the stacking the deck bonus. All right, let's talk about leveling. 10 levels are back. And we really want leveling to feel exciting. We made the change to the talent tree in Mist for a lot of good reasons, and we're really happy with that change overall, but it's a totally fair criticism that getting a new level doesn't feel as exciting as it did in the old day. Even getting plus 1% crit, as lame as that was better than getting nothing. But we want to stop handing out so many new abilities. We don't think it's going to be a great experience if you get 10 new buttons to stick on your bars as you level up from 90 to 100. This has been kind of a long time coming. It's amazing to kind of see the turnaround in the community that now everyone's like, you know what, I'm good. I don't need any more abilities. Stop giving me new abilities. So what we're going to try is from level 91 to 100, as you level up, you'll get some type of upgrade to one of your core spells. Some of these will introduce class changes that we already were planning on making to kind of make it feel like a bonus as you level up. But to be totally fair, some of them are just going to be passive bonuses. Think of them kind of like the old school spell ranks, except you won't have to visit your trainer or anything like that. You always gain a little bit of power just from gaining a level, but we're going to put a really big boost behind some of your spells so you can really feel it. Like, if you suddenly had 20% bonus damage to execute, that's something you're going to feel the next time you go kill someone. But don't expect a ton of class changes overall. Like I said, a lot of these are going to be passive bonuses, not change for change's sake, just to give you a level 93 reward. These are some sample leveling rewards. Hopefully they'll stick, but it's the kind of ideas that you can see that we're playing with. Okay, let's talk a little about items. So our philosophy with itemization, this is like the best reward we can give out in the game, and it's really disappointing when the best reward we can give out in the game feels a little lame. We really want getting a new item to feel exciting. And we think part of the problem here is all the modification you have to do when you get an item. It's really disappointing. You get a new helmet, you're like, oh man, I'm not going to get a meta gem. Maybe I'll just keep it in my bag for a while, and maybe I'll get something better. That's awful. It's time to stop the madness. Hidden expertise. One of our core design values is to make something feel like a bonus. And we think we're at the point where hidden expertise don't feel like a bonus. You have to get to these magic numbers before you feel like you're really fully functional as your spec. Similar, dodge and parry are cool mechanics. Like, it totally makes sense that you're super nimble dude and you dodge out of the way of the dragon claw. But it just hasn't worked out really well as dodge and parry rating that you stack on gear. And we know, particularly lately, tanks are kind of bummed when they get avoidance on their gear. And remember, I'm going to talk a little bit about items here, but yesterday we talked about how we're going to clean up your bag space. I don't want anyone to freak out at all the different types of items we're going to drop, so hopefully you'll have a little more room to deal with it. So I think I have to credit Travis Day with the initial gone slide, but here we go. Now, again, your warrior will still be able to dodge. Maybe we can have more interesting mechanics, like following a successful whatever, you have a higher chance to parry the next attack, but you won't see it on gear. We will have tanking stats, and I can talk about that in a sec here. Ooh, reforging. This is what we call an idea that sounded good on paper. But what it turned into is this terrible cascade where you get a new piece of gear, and now you have to reforge all of your old gear to hit some cap. And yeah, it'll be a little better without hidden expertise, but things like haste caps and crit caps are still out there. And overall, we think it just drags down the excitement of getting a new item when you know you're nowhere near being able to put it on yet. And there's more.
I like how we could get that kind of cheer when we introduced reforging and the same cheer when we get rid of it. It's awesome.
Then 7-0 will bring it back.
It's reverse psychology.
We'll get rid of it. Enchants are one of those other things. We really want enchants to feel like a bonus. Back in the day, you would get your Avalanche, your Crusader, whatever on your weapon. That was a really big deal. Since then, we've kind of gone overboard, as we tend to do. And you're putting enchants on your bracers and stuff like that. What we really want to do is have a system where fewer items overall can be enchanted, but there's more choices for those individual items. So maybe we'll make multiple weapon enchants, and you pick the one that's good for your spec or your playstyle. I feel like I'm beating down on some of the professions a little bit here. Don't worry, we'll try to figure out to make sure to minimize the economic impact to you enchanters out there. But we don't think it's fair to everyone to have to deal with so many enchants just so you can have a little bit of gold in the bank. We're going to do something similar with gems. Very few items are going to have gem sockets, but when they do, they're going to be a really big deal. There'll be something exciting. You might only have a gem on a couple of your tier pieces, for example, but it'll be a pretty big stat bonus. I don't think we'll do any like multiple socketed items, so there's no reason to have set bonuses again. And likewise, we think meta gems aren't really a decision. You just get the one that's right for you as a healer or a DPS, and that decision's over. But if you think of the way like Warforging works today, where there's a random chance that your item could be a little better, there's a random chance that it might have a gem on it. So you might get a weapon, and then a few days later, you get a weapon with a gem socket on it, and now you have the decision of, you know, is this an upgrade you want to use? Do you want to pass to one of your buddies in the group, and so on? Whoa. Nobody's happy but the paladin when the end plate drops. So going forward, we're just going to have plate. If plate drops and you're a plate using class, it's potentially something you can wear. Same thing is true of mail, leather, and cloth. So the way this will work is this is awesome. I get all the good slides. If you're a ret paladin, like most of you are, the plate will have strength on it. If you change to your holy spec, the strength on the plate will change to int, and you can just wear that.
Most popular change ever made.
So even in like PvP, for example, they'll just be the priest set from now on. You don't have to, you know, decide you want the healer one or the DPS one. So I'm talking strictly about armor here. So, you know, helmet, shoulders, legs, all of those very visible pieces. We still want jewelry, cloaks, trinkets, and weapons to be more role-focused. If you talk to healers, many of them will tell you that spirit is actually a pretty interesting stat, and you can decide how much spirit you want on your gear in a way that, say, the mage can't decide how much hit they want on their gear. So jewelry, cloak, trinkets, weapons can still be more role-focused. You might have items with spirit, in which case the healer would be interested. You might have an item without spirit, in which case other people might be interested, or the healer might be as well. Some of these will be less I guess, spec agnostic, so they'll be more spec agnostic, so they may just have attack power, spell power, rather than being like the agility spirit item. And then to replace the loss of dodge and parry, we think we're back at a place where we can just put armor as a good tanking stat. Active mitigation has worked out really well, and we think there's room just to have armor. It won't be the, you know, the stat on every piece because it's not going to be on all of your actual armor, but it can be on things like the rings and cloaks. Tertiary stats. So it might seem like we're really streamlining gear here, but what we're really trying to do is give it a long tail. It's not fun when you go for a long time and don't get your weapon and feel like you're just really far behind everyone else. But at the same time, we don't want you to gear up, you know, in 2 weeks and be done, and then say like, dude, when's the next raid coming out? So we're kind of expanding the idea of Warforging. I mentioned we're doing it with gems. We're also adding these bonus tertiary stats. So you may get a glove one day that has an extra stat on it that does something cool. These don't count against the budget. It's just a bonus when it happens. And here's some examples of tertiary stats we're playing with. I'm not going to read all these. You guys can see the slides. Now, Now again, it's really unlikely, unless you're very dedicated or very lucky, that you're going to have your sturdiness set, because there's just not going to be that many pieces out there. You're not going to be able to stack sturdiness, and guess what? You can't reforge it. We added a little bit about will stack down there because we realize our movement bonuses are kind of difficult to understand about what works with what. So we rebuilt the system to where pretty much any movement speed you get will work with any other movement speed up to some, sane level. Druids. Cleave's been an interesting stat. We played with it a little bit on the trinkets in the latest raid tier, and we don't think it's necessarily fun to be like, I'm going to put on my cleave set, I'm going to take off my cleave set. But if you get it as a bonus on some of your items, hey, that could be pretty cool. You'll do a little bit of extra AE cleaving sometimes. Item squish. We tried it before, we're trying it again. Why? I'm a pretty simple guy at the end of the day, and I have trouble understanding when I see that many zeros on the screen. Make whatever jokes you want. Most of our item inflation comes from previous raid tiers, but it's much less important that Blackwing Lair gear is a massive upgrade over Molten Core gear. Yeah, people are still running that old content, and we're cool with that, but it's not that big a deal that the Blackwing Lair gear is much higher item level anymore. So we're just going to flatten out all of the big jumps that come at the previous raid tiers at these levels. This is current insanity. And these are some slightly more sane numbers. Okay, a bunch of caveats here. I hear people cheering, but I know there's people out there grumbling too. Dumbing the game down. Your relative power will not change. If you look at percentages, if you are a healer and you know how much your flash heal heals on your tank, the bar will still jump by the same amount. The relative power of 5.4 gear will not change. So if you're currently a heroic raider, your gear will be just as powerful as it is today relative to all the other gear, and that'll still translate into going into 6.0. If it takes you 5 seconds to kill a Timeless Isle Gulp Frog, it will still take you 5 seconds to kill a Timeless Isle Gulp Frog. And I should probably say this one 4 or 5 times, but if you like to solo old content, you can still solo old content. We'll make sure that happens. We knew a lot of people were trying to get their Ashes of Alar, trying to get their hammer from Ragnaros, but it turns out a lot of people do this all the time, and it brings a lot of extra value to the game for players who want to keep supporting it. And if you've played on the floor, the item squish is already in, and if you didn't even notice it was in, then awesome. That wraps up our presentation. Looks like we have about 10 minutes left, so we would love to entertain some questions. Be nice to stick to the Warlords of Draenor topics for now, although we are doing a second Q&A later on today that's pretty much open-ended.
We also appear to have a giant dance floor here in case you guys want to dance while you ask the question.
Mosh pit.
Hi. I know you said that the mythic tier of rating will stay outside of the cross realm. I come from a very small server, and we don't have any 25-man teams, and most of our guilds are also very small. We may have the issues coming up with a 20-man team. Do you have any way to address switching from a 10 and 25-man option to exclusively having a 20-man option?
So that's completely a valid concern. On smaller servers, the connected realms that we're unrolling and continuing to roll out are going to help a lot with that in terms of making sure that you have a certain critical mass on any given server, that it feels like you have a lot of active guilds to deal with recruitment and for people to find a home to raid. But that said, we recognize that this transition is not necessarily going to be an easy one, particularly for the current 10-player heroic guilds. One thing that is worth noting is that the introduction of a flexible heroic mode does at least mean that as you're trying to grow upward, you actually can continue to raid as you strive to reach that 20-player mark. Previously, it was impossible to grow from, let's say, 10 to 25, because what does a 16-player raid group look like today in Mists of Pandaria? It looks like a lot of people sitting on the bench being angry. Whereas you can do 16-player, 17-player heroic, then when you get to 20, now you can begin to do mythic. We wanted to get this information out there ahead of time so that people can start planning. And the reality is, when we release a new expansion with new content, you are going to be progressing upwards through those tiers of difficulty. There will be a lot of people returning to the game looking for homes. And our hope is that while we know it's going to be a difficult transition for many to make, in the long run, we'll be able to offer a much more streamlined experience, a much more competitive experience for the higher-end heroic raiders, and a better tuned experience all around.
Hey guys, my question is more around the player experience with questing and garrisons. So how will you manage the suspension of disbelief that happens when, for example, you have a phased-in garrison or a random event that just happens over and over and over again when you want to create a living and breathing world in Draenor? Like all the things that if you just wait a little bit or camp a little bit, you will be able to do. How will you manage those rewards for players?
Maybe you can clarify a little bit. I'm not sure what the garrison and phasing has to do with camping things.
So, for example, if you have a garrison, I'm assuming that is per player and phased for that player. So
right, like the farm.
Yeah, so particularly in that, it has to do with the living and breathing world, because I don't see what the purpose of having a garrison is if you will not have any real consequences for it. For example, why would you have a fortress if it cannot be attacked by other players, for example?
Okay. So I could see, interactions with other players being something that we do as we continue to develop the feature, maybe in the long run. I think, building a base for the sake of building a base is actually really cool. I think players will have a lot of fun, deciding where to put their buildings and what buildings they want to use. I don't think it necessarily requires that it be attacked by other players for it to be cool. Also, as far as its, kind of phased location in the world, you got to bear in mind that 99% of the world is still not phased, right? And it's still all the kind of public adventuring area that you normally experience. So I don't think you'll be running into a problem where you're coming in and out of phases constantly because of garrisons. There are very predefined locations in several different zones where you can build them, but those are, relatively small compared to the zone itself.
It's also worth noting that we have some new tech that will help us better integrate the garrison into the world outside. Whereas with your player farm in Half Hill today, you only kind of see your own personal plots and farm phase in as you kind of walk up to the farm. Our plan is that if you have a mage tower in your garrison and you're 1,000 yards away across the zone, you'll still see the silhouette of your own tower long before you get there.
Hi, I'm Richard Boone, guild leader for Wild the Musical on Chandras. Now, you were saying that you would like to get more friends working together to do the content on this. Where was any love for the guilds? That's our biggest thing for getting friends together. Are you going to bring back, have group will travel?
Well, when we say friends, we mean that interchangeably with guildmates, right? So if you are, going on one of these dungeon runs with your guildmates, that's kind of what all we mean is that you've pre-grouped with somebody before you enter the instance. So if you group up with your guildmates and go into the dungeon, you'll get that stacking the deck bonus, for example.
Okay. 2 expansions ago, you gave us a bunch of guild perks. Last expansion, and so far this expansion, we see nothing.
Yeah, it's one of those systems where we feel like, you know, it accomplished what we wanted it to accomplish for Cataclysm, but it isn't the kind of thing where we feel like we really get a whole lot out of it by continuing to pile on more levels and more perks. If we had some awesome ideas for what perks we wanted to do that just felt like, oh my god, we have to do this, then it would make sense for us to add some levels. But we don't want to be in the reverse situation where we're just increasing the level just to increase the level and then having to contrive perks to fill it out.
Flex rating should also help guilds in a lot of ways. We think flexible gives you a lot of, well, flexibility building groups and keeping a guild together and having different sizes of guilds work with the content. So flex is a really good feature for guilds, I think.
Hey, I'm Suzushiro from Big Crits. My question was on flexible raid sizes. Because right now, flexible caps at like 25 people, which makes sense because every other raid site caps at 25 people. But in Warlords, flexible is the normal one and is the norm. And Mythic is this weird mode that requires a specific number of people. So in that context, flexible, I mean, no other normal raid nodes capping at 25, that feels like some weird, arbitrary number. I mean, why not make it 30? Why not make it 40? I mean, a lot of people, ever since you removed them, a lot of people were asking for 40-man raid spec. I thought they were crazy, but why not give it back to them?
I think that's definitely an interesting suggestion. There is some upper limit at which we lose confidence in our ability to make the fight mechanics scale truly seamlessly, as well as there are obviously issues that people have seen with input lag. The more people are involved, a lot of it scales exponentially in relation to the number of players present. But something like 30 is certainly a possibility, since there are social groups that are around that size today. It's not something that we have planned in stone right now, but it's something we certainly could explore.
My question is directed at Mr. Hazakostas. Hazakostas? That's it.
Yeah, close enough.
What's the status
As a question.
What's the status on character scaling for old 5-mans and raids?
So the feature that was very briefly accessible, you're saying, in the recent 5.4 patch? I think so. That's something that we're exploring. I think the question is really how to do it correctly. We have the ability, as we've seen, you know, in challenge modes and proving grounds, to scale item level down. We've also been exploring how to scale player level down functionally such that you keep your abilities, but maybe that their potency changes. It's something that we're still working on, continuing to work on, and once we have a way that we're happy with in terms of fully integrating it into the game as part of a reward structure, it's something that we'll have more to talk about in the future. But we're definitely interested in finding a way to explore and let people revisit the old content in a way that feels relevant, since there are so many dungeons out there and old raids that people probably never saw at the intended level.
So my question is about the garrison followers. When you send your followers out into the world to do a quest, do a dungeon, are they actually completing that content for you so the player doesn't have to do it, or is it garrison specific?
It's actually going to be garrison specific content. It wouldn't be something where like the follower is taking you know, anything away from you. We're going to craft all of that content uniquely, specifically just for the garrisons.
Hello, I am WatchTech, former top druid in Goon Squad Mal'Ganis, and yeah, Mal'Ganis! So last expansion, we decided we didn't like the hassle of 25-man raids, so we went to 10. And now we do heroics, and it seems like you're taking our content away, so what are we supposed to do?
Again, understandable question, understandable position to be in. That said, I mean, Goon Squad certainly in particular is a fairly large community with, I would imagine, a number of interested heroic raiders to draw upon who may be returning for Warlords. I think that ultimately there is a population of people out there who are looking to do this cutting-edge, difficult content. And there will be some rearranging involved, inevitably, as happened when we went from 40 to 25. But really, we're making this as a as sort of a change with an eye towards the long-term health of the game, towards the long-term health of high-end raiding. and that we'll be able to deliver a better experience when we can focus the design and the tuning and the content creation on a single player size. For example, right now, there are many times where we have some cool mechanic that we would like to do, but we realize it's not going to scale down to 10 players at the high end very well, so we have to leave it on the cutting floor. Going forward, we think we'll be able to deliver a higher level of content, even though we do understand that in the short term, it does put people in a difficult situation.
It looks like we're out of time, so thanks everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, BlizzCon.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome to the Warcraft movie presentation panel. Your panelists are Duncan Jones, Rob Pardo, Chris Metzen, Bill Westenhofer, and Nick Carpenter. What up, BlizzCon?
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Warcraft movie panel. So we did this, I think 3 years ago we did something like this, but this time I think it's going to be 10 times as exciting because we actually have a release date for the movie. So I want to introduce everyone on the panel. So to my right is Duncan Jones. He is the director for the Warcraft movie. He's directed a couple really awesome films, if you guys have seen Moon or Source Code. And more importantly, to you guys, I think Duncan has been playing Warcraft games since Warcraft 1, played Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, World of Warcraft, even played Lost Vikings.
Amiga!
I think you guys all know the gentleman to my left, which is Chris Metzen, the guy in charge of all lore and story and franchise direction in Blizzard and pretty much just the soul of Blizzard. So he'll be able to talk a lot more about the movie and what we've been trying to do with it. And then to his left is Bill Westenhofer. Bill is the special effects supervisor for the film. He's actually won the Oscar twice for Life of Pi and The Golden Compass. But really, I don't think you guys should care about that. What's really important is that he has a level 90 Alliance mage and several other ladies.
A lot of horde out there, I hear. Horde, you out there?
And then to Bill's left is Nick Carpenter. Nick is our VP of Cinematics, and he's really the guy that's responsible for all the awesome Blizzard films. Did you guys see the Heroes of the Storm cinematic yesterday? Well, that is the work of Nick and his talented department. So thank you all for coming. And what I want to do, I'm going to kind of moderate the panel and kind of serve up questions to these guys and just try to get them to talk as much as possible. The one thing I will kind of put out there as a disclaimer is we're still over 2 years away from the movie actually being released, and we haven't even started filming yet. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is really these guys' background, you know, kind of what they've been doing with trying to do all the pre-production on the movie. But there's really not a ton of brand new information that we can reveal because they haven't even started marketing the film yet, so we got a ways to go. All right, with all that out of the way, maybe Duncan, you can kind of start and just talk a little bit about why you like the Warcraft franchise, why you decided to take this on.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm loud. I was, you know, I've been playing games for a while and used to be involved in another franchise playing it, Ultima Online. I started a clan for that, played that for a few years as a beta tester, and then our whole clan kind of migrated over to Warcraft, World of Warcraft when that came out, and was a huge fan of the game, playing it for a couple of years before I started, you know, getting very busy with my first feature film, Moon. And after Moon, I did Source Code. After Source Code, I was kind of really at a place where I had the opportunity to do a couple of different franchise films, but I was already aware that Warcraft was out there and that they were trying to make it into a movie, and it had been taking a little bit of time. And I constantly, my producing partner and I had kept on checking in with the production to find out, what's going on with it. When's it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Is there, any chance, maybe I can get involved? And fortunately, or unfortunately for other people, but fortunately for me, the opportunity arose, and I was given the opportunity to read the script that was available at that time, and I was like, oh, this is so great, but
we say that all the time too.
And I wanted it to be the Warcraft that in my heart I felt the film deserved to be, and at that time it was very human-centric, very alliance-centric. And I thought, no, if we're going to make this into a movie, it's got to be what the original Warcrafts always were, which is you can be a hero no matter what side you're on, and it's about both sides. It's got to be red and blue.
Well, I mean, on that point, the first day we met, we had been working through kind of versions of the story for a very long time, which you guys know, and having that balance represented was something that was very important to us. And in certain iterations of the stories we had the first day we met Duncan, he was just like, this has to happen. And we had kind of been told from time to time, like, it's too much. Audiences really want to focus on one or another. And we had just done this dance, and the first day we met this guy, it's like, it's got to be this. And we're like, oh, yes.
Well, and the funny thing about that, too, was just that I think we had always wanted to see, that other side, the orcs, brought much more forward. And, it always felt like, oh, the audience doesn't really want that. And lo and behold, Duncan came in and pitched to us, and he was worried that we weren't going to go for it. He was like coming in going, I don't know if the Blizzard guys are going to like my pitch, going to like the way we're going with it. And then I think just me and Chris we're holding each other
across the table going, is this happening?
And then another thing, too, which I think got us really excited to work with Duncan was, you'd been turning down other films. Like, after you did Source Code, I think you had a lot of people knocking on your door and really wanted you to work on other films, and you kept on holding out.
There was opportunities, but it's so easy to get sucked into franchises that maybe you don't have the connection to. And I think for me, Warcraft was an opportunity to be involved in something where I actually really gave a shit, and I really wanted it to be what I had loved when I was playing it. So that, yeah, and about that pitch, I mean, the fact that we were gonna try and make sure that if we were gonna do this as a film, we needed to really make sure that our audience, beyond people who know Warcraft, everyone understood that if you're the orc heroes, you have to feel as empathetic and care about them and their situation and why they're doing what they're doing as you do about any of the human beings.
Well, I think that's one of the things that makes Warcraft a lot more unique and separated from something like Lord of the Rings, right? It's that the orcs, the red side, they're not just bad guys. They are characters and they have a viewpoint.
Hold on, one at a time.
Yeah. All right. So, Bill, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got started working with Warcraft and what kind of your play experience.
Sure. Can you hear me? Is that better? So this was interesting. I'll start for a second with when I interviewed for this job. I sat down, and the very first thing that the producers asked me is if I knew anything about the Warcraft universe. And I just about spit up my coffee because I started playing Warcraft in the alpha test way back in 2004. In fact, I became so obsessive, I was on the set of Lion Witch in the Wardrobe, and I had to dedicate a couple hours to make sure I got, can keep going and get my character level and get the dungeon run in. I even, you got to do what you got to do, right? I was working on Golden Compass, and that was in London, and my guild was back here in the States, so I did get up at 2 in the morning a couple times to do a Blackwing Lair run. So with that point, I want to emphasize the fact, with the people who are working on this film, these are Warcraft fans who are making this, and we're going to make sure that it's really special and that everyone's proud of what they have to see. So, specifically for the characters in the film, we're doing live action with CGI. It's an extremely complex endeavor for the visual effects side. A lot of times I liken this to Avatar meets Game of Thrones in terms of the level of complexity of what we're doing. We are using real actors for the orcs. The orcs are going to be as emotive, and like Duncan said, you have to believe them as much as any human character. So we're striving incredibly hard with minute detail to make them as real as possible. This is going to be gritty and real. The guys get dirty. There's, you're down with the characters when they're fighting, but we are dedicating this, and in fact, we have an incredible team at Industrial Light and Magic who is working on the orcs for us. So it's in good hands, and you all will be very proud of it.
So maybe Duncan and Chris, you guys can talk a little bit more about kind of trying to adapt the lore and the storyline and really make it feel like an authentic Warcraft movie.
I mean, I think one of the real difficult decisions we had was what part of the lore to focus in on. You guys have achieved such a huge, vast timeline and so many different stories and memorable characters. It's really about picking what worked for us, and also what really got to the root of what Warcraft is and where it came from, without saying too much.
This feels like quicksand. Right. Because we had been working on multiple iterations of the story, for the years, coming up before we had met, and it was kind of this tap dance between, you focus on, all these different races. Each faction really has a number of races with distinct stories, and ultimately the community, everyone wants to see their thing. Like where's my troll movie? And we sit and go, troll movie, trip out. Really good. I don't know. So it was kind of a process of kind of honing in on what are the themes that are the most universal, right? If it's going to be difficult to construct a story that really sings to everybody's specific factional or racial reality, the trick was can we find that perfect touch point that really has the broadest Warcraft themes that I think everybody gets.
Well, like one of the things that I think we talk a lot about is that Warcraft is such a huge franchise that it's almost like, where do you shine the spotlight? Because there's really no way that you can translate what everyone here has experienced in the game into a single movie. So a lot is figuring out which part of it you want to do, and also what characters do you want to bring forward, because aren't movies a lot more about kind of the characters rather than about the world?
And how much time do you spend in the Lion's Pride?
Exactly.
A lot. So one of the things I think is going to be pretty exciting to people here, though, is maybe talking a little bit about the locations, and the places that we're going to be able to show within the movie itself.
Well, I mean, this seems like an opportunity. We have a couple of pieces of very early concept artwork that we could show, if you're interested in that.
You guys want to see some concept art?
Pushing the magic button.
Uh-oh. There we go.
So we got, is that Draenor? Oh yeah, fantastic. So this is like an early piece of Draenor. And, again, one of the things that we needed to work out is just where the story takes place and how much of it takes place in each location in order to really give a sense of the grandness and scale of the world. This is an environment, obviously, we felt very passionately about making sure was in there. Anyone recognize that? So this is another piece. This is Dalaran. I mean, one of the things we should really mention also is the amazing team that we have around us working with us on the film. The production designer on the film is Gavin Bouquet, who worked on a number of different Star Wars films, ironically.
Yes, Star Wars.
Star Wars. And then we've been working with also with Blizzard's artists as well. There's a number of artists we've been working with from you guys.
Yes. Nick's team has been great, helping and bringing a lot of the DNA from Warcraft, in particular Wei Wang has lent a hand on designing creatures for us, and it's really incredible to see the detail and the work. You're going to see it's as if this world existed first, and what you've been seeing all along is an interpretation, and you're going to see a real orc, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we've had a chance to work pretty closely with you guys, and really realize Duncan's vision. And you guys, from what I've seen, it's not going to disappoint. It looks like a Warcraft feature film, and it's mind-blowing.
That's a little bit of Iron Forge.
It strikes me that one of the really interesting things to have watched over the past 6 months, as Duncan's team has been doing a lot of design, and I've had a little bit more visibility into what Nick's group has been doing. It strikes me that when we're just doing this work, let's say we're building an expansion set or we're just working on the game, so often we'll have a vision, we'll have an idea like Dalaran or Ironforge or any of these spaces. And when you're building it for purposes of a video game, you're kind of constricted by how many polygons you can put into a scene, how you block a scene, player traffic and flow through a city. Like there's so many design constraints, or design strengths really, but that kind of demand things of your vision. We gotta put a window here, we gotta take out this hallway and do this, and it's kind of an exacting science. So one of the really fun things about watching this production process go has been that these guys are kind of freed to kind of capture the vibe of these areas, but kind of explode it out a little bit. Make these areas feel more cinematic. Make them feel a little more lived in, a little more grand than what we can literally do in the game. Like that, Alliance?
And
I feel like home?
And not to make you all jealous, but I did have a little geek out moment when I realized that I was actually going to be standing in Ironforge and in Stormwind. So that I'm pretty excited about.
I mean, I think one of the most fun things for us about working on a film like this at the scale we're doing it at is we actually get to physically build a lot of locations in the film. So
you mentioned Lions Pride Inn, so everyone on the Alliance side. One of the first things they saw was the inn in Goldshire.
You can just imagine, what our production parties are going to be like and where they're going to be.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's even that. It's like, looking at a lot of these big marquee areas, which are super exciting. But just things like, no, we're gonna plant a shot at the Lions Pride Inn. No, it's just like, it's like I've almost spent more time, well, I hate to say this, but like in Goldshire, right, after X number of characters over the years, but it's just so familiar, right? Yeah. It's just the grassroots of Warcraft, and there's obviously places like that all over the world, but I love that this potentially takes us to kind of more of the intimate spots as well that are almost as familiar, right? Well, the one thing, I don't know if we've ever said this before, guys, but I think you will all agree, is that when we talk about Warcraft, we talk about this big franchise, and someone's rocking in the other hall. We talk about this thing, and you talk about the main characters or the plot lines or some of the big chapters that have come before. But the trick is, you know what character is most famous in World of Warcraft to all of us? Hogger. The character that is most famous is the world itself. You might have met Thrall, and you might have fought the Lich King, and you may have found Hogger over there in Elwyn, but I guarantee you we've all spent X number of hours in the Barrens and Westfall, and it's almost like the placement of the trees and the roads and the vibe and the color palettes. It's actually, most of the engagement we've had is literally in the world itself, and that's been a really major value of ours is in translating to film and making this thing cinematic. It's finding those values. Almost like, you guys remember yesterday we were talking about like the player models, like don't break it, right? It's the point of maximum familiarity. Sure, you can reanimate everything, and sure, you can blow the polygons out, but that's not where the flavor is. It's not where our hearts are, or the visuals that we're so connected to. So that value is critically important, that we kind of pull out the nuances of these areas with maximum familiarity. It just feels right, even though it's a little grander for storytelling purposes.
So Duncan, like you kind of mentioned one of the other people that is not on stage that's been working on the film, but maybe you can kind of tell the audience here about some of the other people that are working on the film, and kind of reassure them that Warcraft's in good hands.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the people that I wanted to mention is Maez Rubio, who's doing our wardrobe and costume design, and that has become an incredibly important and interesting puzzle for us to solve, because obviously half of our cast is live action and real, and that's a very traditional route. But with half of our cast being virtual, being performed by actors but using motion capture technology, it's like, how do you actually approach that as far as how you costume those characters? So we're actually, even though they're not going to be performing in the costumes, we actually have to have them for photographic references, and so that we can actually see on camera what those costumes look like, how they move, how gravity affects them. So we've actually started making orc costumes at full scale, which are incredible. Yeah. and Maya's worked on Avatar and also on Apocalypto as well. So I think for what we're trying to do, she was just the perfect person for that.
It just shows that that's the level of detail that we're after and seeking to put into this, getting down to how a rivet attaches and how the leather straps from a pauldron are weaved in. And by building it real, we're getting that stuff as detailed and interesting as possible.
So it's probably safe to say that Maez would always win the costume contest year over year.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Other people I'm working with is Paul Hirsch is the editor that I worked with on Source Code, and has an amazing body of work. He worked on Empire Strikes Back, won an Oscar. Ray, he did Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Just a crazy, eclectic body of work. He's an institution in the industry, and amazing editor.
Cool. Maybe Bill and Nick, you guys can maybe talk a little bit about what it's like to try to translate Warcraft into visuals. I know you talked about it a little bit, but obviously it's going to be a real big challenge to make orcs and do orcs that have acting, how you take these goofy, cartoony-looking characters that we create and make them photorealistic, but still Warcraft.
Well, I mean, funny enough, in the cinematics department, we do this all the time. We work very closely with the game teams, and we try to translate that into a much higher resolution space. And so when we had a chance to be a part of this, the discipline is very similar, except they're just going so much further. And, I mean, like Chris was saying, we've seen all these spaces. We'll make a concept, I'm like, wow, we're seeing it from game and then actually translate to concept, and then what these guys are going to do with it, it's absolutely amazing. And, I can't tell you guys enough, it's absolutely in the right hands. Trust this guy, he's gonna make an amazing film.
It's fun. It's, we want to do it as much justice as possible. And we're pushing the technology. We're doing on-set motion capture, a lot of technical jargon, but it's the kind of thing that we're really, the orcs aren't going to be, they're not monsters. They're really going to act. They're going to have personalities. And then the level of detail is, we'll go to lengths to build a real costume. We'll build full-size lighting maquettes just to get all the details just right.
And there's a constantly moving frontier, I think, on that technology as well. And you see it from the Planet of the Apes movies to Avatar earlier on, and what they did with Mark Ruffalo in the Hulk as the Hulk in the Avengers movie. Absolutely. In fact, it's we're working with the same team that did the Hulk on the ILM movie. Right. And we're benefiting, I think, from the fact that we're working with people in Alex Gartner and Chuck Roven, who Chuck Roven, who works on the Batman movies, was producing those, and Legendary and that team who've actually given us the support to make a film the way we think it needs to be made.
Absolutely. You know, in the environments as well, where what you're going to see, the concept art, it's going to look, you'll recognize it as the environment, but it's going to look completely real. You know, if we're doing Elwyn Forest, there's trees, and perhaps the size of the trees and the distribution are something you might not see in this world, but the fine detail is something that, you know, looks completely photographic. You know, so it's that kind of thing. That's how we're trying to push a realistic, amazing vision of what you've seen in the games and what you're familiar with.
Yeah, just keeping the spirit, and when you guys go through this experience, it's going to feel like you're living in this world. I mean, like he was just saying with the trees, they talk about the bark. When we look at in-game screenshots, we're like, how do we translate that into physical prop? And I mean, down to the roots and the leaves, you guys. Like, when we talk about some of these spaces, these guys dig super deep.
And, you know, there have been times where, as a technical consultant, I've had to log in my character and go fly over to Dalaran to get some screenshots. But, you know, it's good to be a mage. You can port around these things.
I mean, the other thing, you know, like Bill, I mean, he's such a fan. Like every day, like when we're working things out, he'll be like, you know, it'd be really cool. This little Easter egg right here, and I'm like, I don't know if anyone's gonna see. He's like, dude, I got this. And so we're always chasing these little things. You guys, they are putting so much cool little details.
Pay close attention to everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been one of the ambitions, is to strike it on a level where people can enjoy the film who don't know everything about the world, but at the same time have enough things in there, in the subtext and in the environment, and even some of the storylines where you know more than some of the audience will know. So you're going to get even more out of it than what's there for everyone else.
So I think one of the challenging things with taking franchises like this into movies is, you know, how do you partner with a franchise holder? In our case, you know, obviously us. And I think what Legendary has done a great job is that they've always kept us very collaborative. But I thought it might be good to hear from you guys about, you know, working with Blizzard and where the benefit of the collaboration's been and how involved we've been.
Well, I mean, to go back a little bit to what Chris was saying, I mean, I think it was kismet when we first started talking and I gave you my pitch. The relief that that's where you had hoped it was going anyway was really what made it feel like, oh, okay, this is home. This is going to work out all right. You know, I'm not going to be fighting my way through this. We were all kind of already seeing it in the same direction.
Yeah, it was definitely a love connection, like immediately. Like, it was good. It was a happy day. A happy day.
And I think kind of the same things happened on the art side, right, Bill?
I mean, you get, you know, when we talk about designing a character, to have, you know, support from designers who have that in their DNA and know it's a second hand. It just gets that essence of Warcraft without having, you know, automatically in the first go.
I mean, and it goes both ways. I mean, when we work with dev teams internally, you know, everybody gets the Blizzard style, and then we all have this very specific idea of what we want to create. These guys are exactly the same. They plugged right in day one, and we've been running ever since.
It's good to have that mindset, because we do have to work out things. Like Duncan said, we have live action, we have people, and we have live action concerns where, you know, the Warcraft style, if you're going to try to reach over your head to grab something, you have this pauldron that's knocking you in the side of the head. Those are things that we have to work out.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I'm here. Always like, make the shoulder pad bigger, bigger, and there's like,
he's gonna fall over.
This is not gonna work, Nick. I'm like, not my problem.
So, you know, what do you think is going to be the most challenging part of this, trying to put this whole thing together?
Well, I mean, we're at the exciting time where we can really see the shooting date coming up on us now. So it's really about just integrating all of these amazing people who are working together, and making sure that we all kind of hit the mark at the same time, and we're all going at speed. A couple of people I also needed to mention is Simon Duggan, who's our cinematographer, who did iRobot, and also you might know him from Great Gatsby as well. And those are both films where there are so many technical layers to the filmmaking. And you know, to me, it was just really important to surround myself with people who understood the intricacies of integrating all of those different layers and making sure that everything that Bill's got to do fits in with everything that Gavin's got to do and all these other departments, because it is an epic quest to get this film right.
It's very challenging on the technical side. We, you know, when we're done, we leave the stage. Quite often, all you're going to see is a piece of set with a bunch of blue screen, a couple of humans swinging swords at guys in pajamas with little lights on them. So that's got to be translated, and in order to do that right, we have to plan very well to make sure that the finished product is going to live up to what we want.
Well, and for you, Duncan, I mean, this is the biggest film you've ever made. You know, with Moon being, you know, kind of small, and then Source Code I know being bigger. Like, yeah. What is it like for you, kind of making this jump to a film of this scale?
It's interesting because you always have the same puzzles to solve. You know, it doesn't matter how big the film gets. It always ends up you know, how do I fit this grand ambition into this shape? And what makes it easier or harder is the people that you're working with. And again, we've been incredibly fortunate, and I think, you know, smart in the people that we've surrounded ourselves with, and also being able to work so closely with you guys, because I think, you know, working in parallel like this, it keeps us honest to what it is we're trying to make, and it makes sure that we're always going to, you know, go for broke and make sure that we make this a film that reflects that world. We can't, you know, detour too far, because, you know, then we're not addressing, you know, what the goal of the film. So I think that's been great, actually, because in a way it kind of keeps us anchored and makes sure that we're making the film that you guys want, and I think what you guys want as well.
Cool. So, yeah, I think we've asked most of the questions that we had up here for the panel, and we're going to ask some questions out to let you guys ask a few questions of the audience. But I kind of need your guys' help a little bit, because I've been kind of arguing with these guys backstage and trying to get them to talk a little bit more about what's coming out, what's going to be in the film. Do you guys want to hear any more actual details about what's going to be in the movie? So
it's 2 years away. It's 2 years.
I know, but you're up on Twitter all the time, so I figure you know, you got to be able to like reveal some stuff. And you know, you did something special for Comic-Con, and I think BlizzCon is more important than Comic-Con. Because I just feel like, you know, this is where it all came from. Comic-Con's just a bunch of posers compared to the BlizzCon audience. Right? So I really need your guys' help. I need you guys to really talk Duncan into this, and then when all the legendary PR people rush the stage, I need you to tackle them.
There are some producers in the front. I'll ask them if give them something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not fair. You have to give them something.
Yeah, I know, exactly, right?
I could get fired. I need to just make sure I'm not going to get fired.
Get fired. Don't get fired. Don't get fired.
No one's run on yet. No one's run on stage yet. Okay, well can we just mention, are they out in the front now?
Well,
can we just mention just a couple of characters? Just a couple of character names. All right, so, you know, we've been, you know, obviously we sort of talked our way around it, trying to not mention any names, but it is orcs versus humans, obviously, and for us, I think the story that was most important to tell was an origin story of that first contact. So for us, for me, and I think you guys agreed, that the story to tell was between Lothar and Durotan. That was the story to get us. And I would imagine most of you know your lore and can kind of know where this is going. But it's, you know, I think if I stick with that, those are the two guys. I would say that again, talking about the amazing input that, you know, and working with Blizzard, some of the stuff that Wei did for Durotan, some of the artwork is just mind-blowingly good. And it's been hard to find an actor who looks like Durotan. Every time I meet someone, I grab their face and I just kind of squish it around a little bit. kind of see it.
Yeah, quite often you get a concept design and then you want to work the actor into that. This is the ways artwork is so great.
Yeah, we're gonna make it the other way around.
Makes you want to think the other way around.
So thank you for outing that to everybody. I think everyone really appreciates that. And hopefully everyone can be on the internet pleading that Duncan does not get fired. It'd be nice if we could keep him on the film. But maybe, Chris, do you want to talk a little about Durotan and Lothar and kind of their back lore for maybe the people that don't know much about them?
Well, now I'm worried about getting fired. So it's, how do you do that without saying too much? I would say without saying too much, I would say for you guys who are dialed in with the lore, you might immediately go like, huh? Wait a minute, did Lothar ever meet Durotan? Because we haven't actually covered that in the deep lore. But the shape of the vision that Duncan's been playing with is just, yeah, these guys were tailor-made for each other. They both represent ideals that are the highest ideals for each of these races. You know, Lothar for his soldiery and his loyalty and his, you know, this guy that has been burdened with protecting his kingdom, Stormwind, for a very long time, potentially throughout a time of peace. And you have Durotan, who classically, while we technically in the RTS games back in the day didn't really see him, he's a character that was introduced a little later, but Durotan as well really represents kind of the highest ideals of the orcs when they are not crazy. You know, that family and clan, you know, are the highest ideals. This is a guy that believes in his people, that believes in their future, and is ultimately horrified by the idea of them getting into some dark, cursed areas. And ultimately, again, without totally spilling the beans or whatever, both of these men are going to find themselves at this crux point of history, really, and they will be put to the test.
I mean, both of them are protectors. You know, both of them are protectors of their peoples, and I think in an impending war situation that you just know is coming and you can't seem to find a way out of it, I think both of them want to do the right thing for the people that they're responsible for.
Well, and I think one of the exciting things about exploring the storyline that we are is that the early games really weren't a great mechanism for telling these stories. So it really allows the movie a lot of flexibility to kind of do the, like you like to always say, the ultimate version of Warcraft history.
Totally. I always go back to, you know, as we're talking about all these ideas, like the Ultimate Spider-Man thing. I don't know if you guys know about the Ultimate line, but it was an opportunity in the comics world for kind of retelling classic stories and really keeping all the details and all the vibe, but just kind of tightening the bolts after years and years worth of fictional development. So kind of working with these two characters and the vector of this story allowed us to kind of really tighten a lot of bolts and tell this thing just in a much tighter way than we had been able to before, you know, through the game series. So it's been an incredibly rewarding process of relooking at these ideas. Can you guys hear me? Is this thing cutting in and out?
That's
all good?
I'll just speak louder then.
So, you know, as Duncan was saying earlier, I mean, especially through the character of Durotan, I mean, it's really embodying the nobility and the power and just the huge-heartedness of orcs that are not corrupt. Was really, really a fun thing to see kind of come into play. And boy, I'm struggling to not say anything that would be
Well, the other thing I think is really interesting when you look at kind of the history of where Warcraft started was those games actually told parallel stories.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so...
The series, yeah, especially the RTS series, had always been very binary, right? You play the human campaign, you can play the orc campaign. And in those early games, they were kind of contiguous, right? So we had to decide, as we started Warcraft 2, who won? Warcraft 1, right? Well, you know, the orcs kind of got the better of them that time. And we had to kind of fudge the continuity as it went because they were really built to be one or the other. So kind of looking at this structure, you know, for this film has been really fun. I mean, obviously someone's got to win, someone's got to lose. But in a weird way, it's kind of like, I don't know, everybody loses at least a little bit, right? It's kind of period.
Well, I mean, I think it's a hell of a thing, really, that we're getting the chance to make the movie this way, because it's, for any film, any franchise, I think to tell a story where you're really, honestly telling it from both sides, especially a war film, it's unusual. And I think the fact that we've been kind of given the opportunity to do that really on a storytelling level is breaking a few barriers in certainly for these kind of for a big film like this. I don't think you're going to see many films that have this kind of structure.
Well, and especially when you're telling it from a side, you know, from what I think a lot of non-geeky moviegoers will view as the monster side.
Yeah.
Right. I think everyone here understands that it's, you know, that is not who the orcs are.
Absolutely.
But it's going to be really unique to try to, I don't want to say humanize them, but, you know, to really make, you know, kind of that broad, empathize with them with a more broad audience. All right, so I'm going to let you guys ask a few questions. Understand that we're probably not going to be able to reveal any more than we've already dragged out of Duncan, but if you guys have questions for anyone on the panel or want to hear more about kind of their history or how to make movies or anything like that, we're going to go ahead and take some questions.
All right, Duncan, first of all, over here. Canucks are going down. I was originally going to ask about what camera you were thinking of shooting this in, but after that revelation, I'm going to ask for a request. Can you blink once for yes, 2 for no, if the movie is going to tie in with the ending of Warlords of Draenor?
I cannot tell you any more than what I've said. But what I will say is that I also cannot tell you where we're going to be shooting the movie, which may be fairly obvious.
Well played.
Giving a shout out to my friends. Now, there are war movies, and then there are war movies. Is this going to be more like something like The Golden Compass or the war scene in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe? Or is this going to be like The Patriot, Braveheart? I mean, what kind of rating are we looking at?
Gladiator. Really gritty, muddy, down in the dirt, covered in grime.
Hello. You've talked about the epicness of the world, characters. What about the music?
That's a very good question.
I mean, I know you guys have some wonderful talent in-house. Is that the route that it's going to go? Or are we going to see something, you know, Zimmer, anything big like that?
It's a very good question, and I think I can't tell you any of the details on the music. But what I can tell you, I think, is as true to the spirit of the world and the characters, I think it's as important that the music also has a presence, because the music is, you know, for the game itself, it envelops you and it's what brings you into the game world, and the music of the film has to be as true to the game as the environment is.
So my question, when I think of humans versus orcs, I think of that traditional cinematic where the infernal comes down and breaks them apart. Now, the armor of the human is very exaggerated, very cool, kind of unrealistic, but I'd love to see that translated to real life. Will you guys be able to keep that Blizzard style intact in the armor?
That has been a huge part of the development and the work that we've been doing together, especially with Nick and the team of artists that they have at Blizzard, is to find that fine line where it's believable and it works in a real-world situation, but it stays true to the scale and the impressiveness, I think, of the game armor.
Yeah. These swords that are being built are the biggest swords that a human can wield, I'll tell you that.
It won't disappoint.
Well, and that's been one of the challenges, though, with the costuming is like a lot of, I think, our costumes digital characters can wear, but maybe not actual actors. Yeah, right. So maybe you can talk.
I can't see out of this damn thing. You run into little things. There's no scabbards anywhere in World of Warcraft. So when we figure out where a sword's going to go, they don't just hit the Z key and it pops in their hand. So, we have to work out those kind of things.
Blizzard has been really amazing in releasing collector art books and even in bookstores, cinematic art books. Are there any plans for an art book for this movie?
I don't know if there are. There are certainly not plans at this stage, but what I would say is that we are documenting the process as we go along. And the concept artwork that's being made for the film, obviously you've seen 4 pieces, but that's 4 of 4,000. I mean, there's so much artwork behind the scenes that's being generated. I would love to see something at some point come out. I know my beautiful wife is doing a behind-the-scenes photography of all of the construction and of all of the department's work. So I don't know what we'll end up doing, but we've certainly got the assets for it. So hopefully at some point in the future, you know, I would love for that stuff to get released.
Hi, I'm Netherwind from the Alderman server. Audacity is our guild. My question is about the cast. Since you're going to start filming in January, do you have any cast worked out?
Yep. Sure do. Lots of them.
Hi, Warspark, Horde, yeah. My question for you is, I understand you can't reveal that much, but can you cast Chuck Norris?
I think the question is, can I not cast Chuck Norris? He can do anything.
Hi, I'm Peter Yurkowski. I grew up on these games. Are you still casting for these movies? I'm an actor, and I would love to be in this. I mean, I'm going to go there. All these people want to know that, too.
Let me see. I'm trying to think if I can give you some lines. You can try it right now, but oh, that would be giving away too much. I can't do that.
Hello. Oh, my question's about if you're gonna plan on making it into a trilogy.
Into a trilogy. Well, you know, I think for us right now, it's absolutely about getting this first film right and making sure that we, you know, tell the story that we want to tell. But, you know, let's be honest. If we're gonna do this right and it works out, I think we would all be excited and enthusiastic about continuing the story. It's not like we have a lack of stories to tell, and we certainly have an amazing cast of characters.
It seems to me that we could do a number of trilogies if we really put our minds to it.
Yeah. On movie 7, we'll look back at the initial trilogy and say that.
I was going to say, go see it a couple times.
First of all, for the Alliance. Right. My question is the main thing going to be based on Eastern Kingdom or Draenor?
I would say that the majority of the tale does take place in familiar locales located in what we know as the Eastern Kingdom.
I just heard someone uncock a gun over there in the back. I think you're okay.
We're cool. It's cool. It's cool. Did someone just say the Eastern Kingdoms of Outland? Was that what I heard? That's too clever.
So you've made references to a lot of superhero movies and other nerdy movies, and among those, there tends to be a bit of a lack of representation of strong female characters, and Warcraft notably succeeds in doing that. And you can see you have a fairly mixed audience here, especially for a convention like this. But I mean, are you planning to cast some of the heroic characters? I know Garona's around here, and Sylvanas, and Jaina, and Terinde. I mean, it just goes on. But so far, everyone mentioned has been male, and yeah.
Well, actually, I think one of the challenges that these guys have had, it's been kind of funny, I think, for especially Chris and I, is that if you look at the lore during that era, it's pretty much a bunch of young white guys, and that's been, I think, one of the challenges, that when you're young and you're just kind of making up characters, you're just making up what you know. So what really the movie guys have been saying is, you guys should have more female characters. I think that'd be better for the movie. So that's actually been, Duncan and Bill and the movie guys have really been pushing that quite a bit. And obviously, we're kind of outer reveals today, but it's a huge value for the production and for Duncan himself. And I think you guys are going to be pleased once we finally can reveal a lot more details.
Without revealing too much, I really can't reveal any more names, but I think any of you who know your lore will see that there is definitely the opportunities for some very strong female lead roles in what we're doing. Yep.
Michael Gonzalez, combat vet, hi Jal, and for the Horde. When's the soonest we can see a preview?
That would be very soon. Wait till.
Hey, I would say come next year.
So probably sometime next year. It's one of those things that they haven't even started filming yet, so that schedule is just not put together yet. And I think a lot of times it's like about a year out from the release they start doing previews and things like that.
I would say that I think next year's BlizzCon panel is going to have a hell of a lot of interesting stuff to show.
There you go. So make sure to come to BlizzCon next year.
Okay. Hey, I'm Narmana of Ouroboros, and I was wondering why you decided to make a movie instead of possibly a TV series, since you have such a big story that's beautiful that you can put into a TV series.
I guess I would answer that these guys have an awful lot on their plate as far as delivering games.
I would say unofficially, like nothing official at all. I'm just riffing here, but like I want one of those too.
I think the other thing too, if you look at when we kind of went down the road, I think it was in 2006 when we decided to do a movie. That was way before like Game of Thrones existed, right? Like I don't think fantasy in TV had been as proven as it is today. And if we're starting over again, maybe we would just do both.
Which means we've been doing this for so long. The industry of television has transformed itself.
Well, and if Duncan does the job I know that he's going to do, then maybe more studios be knocking down our doors to do TV shows.
It goes back to that point about the number of stories that you guys have available to work with. We get this right, and we're going to do our everything to make sure it turns out well. Then you can go anywhere with this. You can start going anywhere.
This is not my main question, but I'm very interested in the previous gentleman's question about auditioning. My agent would like to know. But I'm wondering when we can pre-order tickets to the movie on our Blattle.net account, and what epic pet we'll get.
Great idea.
Wow, we haven't even got to the place to start thinking about ideas like that. I think I'm going to have to make sure to write that one down and think about that once we get a little bit closer.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, you should be working in our marketing department.
Hi. Earlier I heard Warcraft referred to as a franchise, and it is, but I think at this point it's really hallowed ground. It's an institution, and it's as much ours as it is yours. And the question I need to hear answered to know that this is in good hands is, are you taking this movie as seriously as they took Lord of the Rings?
I can't speak for Peter Jackson. All I can say is, you know, those movies were groundbreaking and took me into a world, you know, in a way that I hadn't seen ever, I think. You know, I mean, it just completely enveloped you in this whole culture and world. And, you know, those were the movies that inspired me and wanted me to be able to do something like this. I mean, I think, you know, my first two films were science fiction. And I think there's been an absolute explosion in what kind of science fiction films are getting made right now. And I think, you know, myself and Neil Blomkamp, when we did District 9 and Moon, you know, right in 2009, science fiction had kind of been not really seen as that opportune a place to actually branch out and tell different kinds of stories. And I think right now, fantasy films have the Lord of the Rings franchise. And that's what people see and think of when they think of fantasy films. And what I really want is to have the opportunity to explode fantasy in the same way that you know, science fiction has now exploded. And I think Peter Jackson has really set the bar as to what fantasy needs to be. Anything we do has to match or beat that.
Hi. I'm sure a few people in the audience has some opinions on this, but stereo conversion versus native. What's your opinion?
I have one eye much better than the other. So 3D films are not something that immediately works great for me. I actually prefer watching the 2D experience, but I've seen some things. But 3D is obviously a massively important draw for some people who really get a lot out of it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Gravity yet, or if you went and actually saw that in 3D, but you know, the response to that has been that 3D can work. So, you know, we'll look into it. I think 3D is something that I would hope that we would release in both so that people could choose which one they want. I'm a 2D fan, but I know that there are people out there who really do love 3D as well.
All right, we're almost out of time, so we probably don't have time for one, maybe two questions.
Awesome. All right, so I'm a linguistics major. Let's wait here myself. All right, so I'm wondering, you guys brought up Avatar, Lord of the Rings, and Game of Thrones, and they all have something in common, that they have fleshed out languages that sort of add more depth to the world. Do you need someone to flesh out Orcish? And if so, when do I start working?
We do have someone who's fleshing out Orcish, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, the job is taken. And he is someone who has worked on some of those things that you mentioned. No, we're in good hands, but there will be, I think, more to that language at the end of the development of this movie that maybe already exists from the game side of things. And hopefully that will cross-filter back to you guys as well if you'd want to use it.
Osko, Raka.
Kek. All right, last question.
Zug indeed.
Hello, my name is Keaton Savage from Austin, Texas, and I was just wondering, what are you trying to gear this for? Like, what tone and rating? Is it going to be PG-13 to appeal to a much broader audience, or is it going to be R to allow for more stuff
to be put into in some way.
I missed the end.
Rating.
Oh, about the rating. It's, I think we're going to be probably PG-13. So I think, but when you actually look at the films that have come out lately at PG-13 and what you can do in that, there is a constantly shifting and sliding line as to what is possible. The Batman movies were PG-13. And if you remember the Joker scene with the pencil, that's PG-13. So you can get away with some shit in PG-13.
All right. I want to thank all you guys for coming out of the panel, and especially thanking so much that Duncan and Bill is here to share all the information about the movie. And please, all you guys, give them a hand for making all these reveals possible. All right, and wait till next BlizzCon, and hopefully we'll be back showing more.